Why are you guys walking across the country? We get asked this question all the time. And even after 3 years of walking, I'm still struggling to answer the question. It's not so much that I don't know why I'm walking, but the reasons really are so numerous that it can be very difficult to package it concisely. It's like, how much time do you have? How deep do you want to go? So we won't be trying to package it concisely today. I thought I would speak to you informally, and I would keep this video minimally edited as we take a deep dive into just what might compel someone to take on this great big crazy adventure. Our website's probably a pretty good place to start. You can find our mission statement there. It says something along the lines of, the quality of our thoughts determines the quality of our lives, as well as the lives of those around us. Our mission is to deliver the kinds of content and tools that can help individuals retrain healthier thought patterns. I think to a lot of people that might seem vague and ambiguous. And to a certain extent, we're leaving it open. That way we can discuss the things that we feel need to be discussed as they come up. But I think also it can feel vague and ambiguous because in life, we live very routinely. We work at the same job for years. We associate with the same people for years. Most of us are caught up doing very similar things for very long periods of time. Same routine, same culture, etc. And so we identify with our thoughts. We think of ourselves as this kind of person or that kind of person. And we don't realize just how capable we are of changing. Many of us work against change as much as we can. Most of our life is a struggle against change. But when you walk, you're subjected to every kind of person and so many different experiences. It's interesting to think that in just a week of time on the walk, I can experience more than I ever experienced working a standard 9 to 5 in like 1 to 4 months time. And you grow to learn a lot about yourself, but you also grow to see just how much you change with these kinds of experiences. You don't have to walk, of course, to make those sorts of changes. You can change through different means, but the walk is the extreme example of this. And that's part of the reason for the walk. We are the example of what you're capable of if you lean into the fact that you're capable of such change, that you're capable of acclimating to nearly anything. We've experienced great luxury on the walk, and we've experienced great struggle on the walk. And we've been pretty happy through most of it, honestly. I was watching a YouTube video of myself recently where I was maybe complaining a little bit too much getting up to Deception Pass. That was a really hard day. It's not that we don't experience struggle or that we're not suffering some or a lot of the time, but it doesn't penetrate us in the same way anymore. It's just kind of there in the moment. You don't carry it with you, though. It doesn't make your day bad. You just move on, realizing that the moment you're experiencing will always yield to the next moment. The walk has so much to do with the nature of mind over anything else. In the School of Philosophy, there's a rhetorical tool, you might say. It's called reductio ad absurdum, reducing the argument to absurdity. And that's kind of what the walk is for what are you capable of with regard to change? What are you capable of overcoming? What are you capable of, what are the people that you're capable of embracing? How much love are you capable of? The walk just forces you into that extreme end. And then the lessons that you learn from the extreme end that you might not have bumped into had you not ever experienced the extreme end of things, you can bring back to other people. It all feels rather superficial to even talk about it that way, though. I mean, honestly, like, this is part of why I wanted to shoot the video, and I feel like I'm going to end up I'm going to, like, look back at my past self and be getting in trouble with my future self. There's just so much more that needs to be said. More than anything, we're trying to make the journey more raw recently and unfiltered and just fully human as you can possibly be. And here's the thing, we're walking because we feel called to, in a way. It, like, literally feels like I was what I was built for. This was the thing that I was meant to do. Is it what I was meant to do indefinitely? Probably not. I don't even, it's hard to imagine walking indefinitely. I don't want that. There's so much struggle involved with all of it, but it's like this human journey, I don't think it just means something to us. It means something to other people. We live in this incredibly divided world, and Paige and I here are like this island moving through it, making friends with nearly every kind of person. And we need that. We need it desperately in society. We're only capable of doing that because of the kinds of perspectives that we train, the kinds of thoughts that we have pushed ourselves toward. But we can all do that pretty much because we live those routine lives, because we don't subject ourselves to the kinds of experiences that force change. We think to ourselves, well, I would never tolerate that, or I can't put up with that, or I can't get along with those people, or I'm not that person. I'm not the person that can walk across the country. I'm not the person that can, hug any kind of somebody. Like, and they're just these stories that we've told ourselves. It's not true. It's nonsense. When people used to come up to me to hug me, this was the kind of person that I was. I would stiff arm them. I didn't want hugs. I thought physical affection, like, was outside of romantic partners, was just silly. What's the point of that? You smell like a human being. I don't want to smell your cologne or your body odor or your breath. And, like, do I need to? And you're going to be touching me. And, like, that's ridiculous. There's one of the ideas that I've been wrestling with a lot recently, because of the background that I come from. After leaving religion, I slingshotted really hard over to logic and rationality and skepticism and critical thinking. And those are all incredibly useful tools, but philosophy can clip an angel's wings. And it's not really the way that we live our lives. There's this current of magic that flows through the human condition, and it's what everything that we do is predicated on. It's what our morals are predicated on. You can't turn morality into something that's just purely rational, and people would love to be able to do that, but what you end up with are things like consequentialism and utilitarianism, which, if you're not familiar, I'll run you through it really quick. So, probably like the best way to it, the runaway trolley thought experiment. You've got a train on track to hit 5 people that are tied to the tracks, or you could pull the lever and divert it, and it will veer toward only one person on the tracks, but then, of course, you'll be responsible for having directed the train over to that person. So do you pull the lever? Most people say, yeah, of course I would pull the lever. I got to save the 5. That seems like the rational thing to do. But you just continue growing outward from this. Well, okay, what if you, by your mathematical prowess, knew that if you pushed this fat man off of a bridge in front of the train, and the train hit the fat man instead, but it saved the 5 people? Would you push someone in front of the train to save the 5? And then it starts feeling a little bit more icky. What if you were a doctor and you've got 5 patients that need organ transplants from one particular blood type that you've not found a donor for, and then this guy walks in, he's not connected to anybody, he has to go under general anesthesia. You know that you can get away with it and harvest his organs to save those 5 people. Do you do that? It grows increasingly icky, up to the point that you reach something like, what about as a politician that has to bomb a city in order to get rid of a terrorist or something like that? How do we determine, when the cost of innocent lives is worth that sort of action? And then you can make that argument for the kinds of information people gather on you. You could make a big brother argument, a utilitarian argument for the existence of a big brother-like entity that has the ability to observe everything that's going on in society, what everyone's doing in society. But obviously that feels icky. Maybe it makes it safer, right? Maybe Big Brother watching over us makes a near perfectly safe society. Nobody's ever hurting anybody else. Nobody can get away with committing a kind of violent crime. And we're all being monitored all the time. Is that worth it? Anyway. The magic needs to be pumped back into the world in many ways. And that starts here. We need to exercise our rational faculties and our logical faculties, but we also need hope, and we need purpose, and we need meaning. And those things don't necessarily come rationally. We need to feel love for other people, and we won't necessarily make our way there rationally. But we can make our way there by the example of someone else. We can make our way there by the example of someone who's doing it, who's walking across the country to show you that you can get along with nearly anybody, who's walking across the country to show that you can overcome nearly anything if you put your mind to it. We can hear about these things, and we can learn about them philosophically, like through the essays that I write. But to see someone out there that's actually doing it, that's what we're doing it for. The world needs that person. It's sorely lacking for that person. And someone who's doing it transparently. Not someone who's doing it because they're raising money for cancer. It's not that doesn't have its own... That's obviously important. Walking for a charity, that's fantastic. But this isn't really like that. It is a breakaway from everything. Can a person build a life toward the ultimate good and live toward the highest virtue in everything that they do? Will they find support doing it? Will the world welcome them with open arms? Is the world like that anymore? Or is it just all about business and money? Have we all been reduced to numbers and consumers? Part of our message is that no, that's not true. We have not. We can be the example, and the world out there that we get to showcase is setting the example as well. You can't grow to become the example yourself, though, unless you take on those kinds of lessons and you use those sorts of tools to reframe your perspective, like we're talking to people about. Since the walk sits at the far extreme end of what it means to change and what it means to get along with nearly every kind of person, we hope to give you those lessons in written format as well, because we just retain things a little bit differently when we read them. We process things differently. I mean, Reading, for example, increases white matter in the brain. Much like meditation increases gray matter in the brain, everything that we do is altering our neural connections. It's changing our neurophysiology. If you look at neurons under an electron microscope, they fractal out like branching rivers or branching trees or something like that. And the neurons are reaching out to make these new connections that are only formed according to where we're placing our attention. And so you can grow those connections toward open-mindedness and a lack of judgment and love, or you can grow those connections toward divisiveness and an us versus them mentality and groupthink mentality and black and white thinking. Or you can embrace nuance, realize that most people are trying to do good, work on assuming that whoever it is that you're interacting with has good intentions at heart, even if maybe they're failing in their delivery. In everything that we do, we're training our minds toward a certain function. And with the walk, we're purely training our minds toward the highest virtue, if it's at all possible. I don't want to say that like in a kind of virtue signaling kind of way. I mean, my goodness, we fail all the time. I was watching this YouTube video that Paige had just created of our walk over Deception Pass, and I felt like I was complaining way too much. It was like a nice spotlight on me as I was seeing it for the work that I still have left to be done, the work that I need to commit to just as much now as ever, because I need to be that example. And we can all be that example. We don't have to do it walking across the country. We do it in our interactions with each other. We do it when we don't blow up at someone who's being totally ridiculous. We do it when we maintain our stoic composure and we don't let the opinions of others unnecessarily undermine our rational faculties, but we lead with our understanding of our intentions first, right? So is their criticism valid and accurate, or am I being won over by the fact that somebody just has a petty opinion of me? Why are we walking across the country? We're walking across the country because experience is the most important thing in life. Life isn't really about anything else. It's not about the stuff that you accumulate for yourself. It's not about the great, fantastic body that you have to show off. It's not about living comfortably. Some of it's about relationships, but those are a kind of experience. Comfort, I suppose, is a kind of experience, but it's not the end-all for experience. Experience really is what we're here for, and we're losing so much of our time to waiting for our good experiences. Lose so much time waiting for the weekend, waiting to get off work, waiting to be there with our families, waiting to, let go of that little secret that we've hidden from our spouse, waiting to fully be there with our kids, fully be present with any of the people that we're closest to. We're in this constant race toward the next thing. It's the next thing, the next thing. Desire's always in the back of our mind, chattering away. And it's not just about the things that we buy. It's about the accomplishments that we have, our status in society. What do we look like to other people? And is any of that really fulfilling? When I think of like a world that's the most fulfilled, I often think about some of the smaller communities that we've had the opportunity to integrate with. And it never comes from the things or the status or anything like that. It's in the community itself. And it's in your role in the community. We find fulfillment and we find purpose in making the lives of those around us better, and in making the place that we're surrounded by better, in nurturing our environment and in caring for what's closest to us. It's difficult to accomplish those aims too when we're so busy pointing the finger about the bad things that other people are doing. Why are we walking across the country? We're walking across the country to show that you don't need a vehicle to travel and that our road systems need to be safer. We're walking across the country to show that you don't need to live conventionally in order to find contentment, satisfaction, or fulfillment. We're walking across the country to show that you don't need to live conventionally in order to do something good for the world. That just because you don't live conventionally, you're not like subtracting from there's this huge bias against homeless people. And don't get me wrong, it's true that within many of the homeless communities, like, they have their problems. There's people that are homeless because of drugs, and there are people that are homeless because they're mentally unwell, and some people are homeless because that's the experience that they wanted to live. And if they're living minimally and they're not taking too much from others, I don't feel like that's such a bad thing. But they still have the ability to keep a tidy space. They don't have to trash the area that they're in. And some homeless people are just that way. When I lived in Denver, I was the ever-walking artist, and I walked and I painted at the same time. And I got to meet a lot of homeless people on the streets there. They definitely like to talk to me wearing a sign on my back. And that was what I found. Some of them were well educated. Some of them, I was having this conversation about the id as it relates to ego with regard to Freud's idea of the conscious mind and versus the unconscious mind. And I think that was like one of my first moments where I had really had my opinion of what homeless people were undermined in just like the blink of an eye. That might be a good thing to touch on. For those of you that don't know, the walk has changed me dramatically. This lovey-dovey stuff that I'm sure probably to many people is just like, ugh, that's icky, gross. I mean, I was the icky, gross kind of person. I hated people. Like, I thought everyone was an idiot. I thought everybody was living in the wrong way. While I wasn't doing anything particularly good myself, I was just sitting at home and playing video games. But I thought everybody out there was making the world a worse place. I didn't want to meet new people. I didn't want to even go out with many of my friends if it meant that they were going to be with some other person. The walk changed me more than anything in that respect. People were extending a helping hand from every demographic that I had a problem with. And eventually I came to realize pretty much everybody they have love in their heart. Is everything that they're doing great? No, of course not. But have you ever met someone that's just doing all the right stuff, we all disagree with somebody in some way. And we certainly disagree with our own selves in some way. It's a fairly myopic worldview to imagine that somebody needs to abide by all of the things that you think ought to be done the way that you think they ought to be done in order for them to be considered worthy of your time, worthy of your company, even for you to just consider them a good person. Now, I don't want to go too far into the weeds here. Like, I think that good and bad are relative terms, and they too are so reductive and simplistic that it's almost not even worth using them. But to speak of them colloquially, it would be fine to say that most people are good people. At the very least, most people are trying to be good people. And if we want to start judging people based on criteria pertaining to their outward actions, or like the cost of their existence on the rest of the world, pretty much none of us are going to be seen as good people. That too is a problem with consequentialism versus something else. And what is that something else? Nothing really. Like, Paige and I don't belong to any particular ideology, and I don't think that we need to either. I don't think that any of us do. In order to have love in our heart, I think in most cases, identifying with one particular group or one particular ideology gets in the way of us forming those relationships. Why are we walking across the country? Fuck it. We're nearly 30 minutes into the video, so why not just go there? For those of you who have made it this far, let's talk about the real reason we're walking across the country. I've said, we felt called to, this is what I was made for. Let's dive into it. We're talking about the ability for people to change. We have the ability to change because the self is not static. This is one of the big things that Buddha had come to preach. He talked about anatta, or the no-self teaching. And he was engaged in some kind of dialogue with this king, where the king, he was like, this is ridiculous. It's nonsense that you're telling me that I don't have a self. Is it not me? Am I not the person who wages war? I mean, I tell people what to do. I'm a singular entity. I am clearly one thing. And Buddha says something along the lines of, I'm just totally butchering the story, but he says something along the lines of, you're as much yourself as a chariot is a chariot, but is the wheel of the chariot the chariot? Is the horse to the chariot the chariot? What about the spokes to the wheel? Are those the chariot? You can take the chariot apart entirely, and is it a chariot at that point? So it is with the nature of self. You can get bonked on the head and become more irritable. Like, your brain can change in structure such that you're made into an angrier person. That was the thing that happened with Phineas Gage. He was like the beginning of our understanding of the different brain regions and how they related to mind. He had this tamping rod go through his left frontal lobe, and his colleagues later reported that he was not like the responsible, delightful Gage that they used to know. He had become kind of unreliable and a bit of a jerk. It doesn't just require that we experience some kind of trauma in that way to change as a person. When we meditate, it grows gray matter. When we read, it grows white matter, right? You can shrink your amygdala from meditation. Your brain is always changing, and it's always forming these new connections. And as far as I can tell, with regard to my digging into neuroscience, or even just my own meditation and introspection, I keep peeling back the layers to find myself. Am I here? Am I here? Am I the thinker of my thoughts? No, because if I just sit idle and I pay attention, those thoughts arise spontaneously. They come out of the ether. They just come out of nowhere. I only have control over them insofar as I have the ability to witness them and observe them objectively. But if I'm anything, I'm the witness to those thoughts, and that space is devoid of everything. It can be very difficult to get yourself all the way back to just the inner witness. But in that conscious space, if you can loose yourself of everything else, it's devoid of the concepts that we use to divide the world. It's devoid of the forms that we give things. We see a plant as this individual plant because of my ability to hold it, and it has these different characteristics. But it's part of such a larger process. I mean, this flower is the result of all the minerals it's sucked up from the dirt. It is just an outward extension of the ground that it's grown out of. And that's true of me as well. That flower, if I ate it, it would become a part of me in some way, shape, or form. That's why we physically degenerate over time and psychologically degenerate if we feed ourselves the wrong things. We are a product of the things that we consume. And that is true also of the self. The self is a product of the things that you consume. The first time that I really bumped into this idea was, I think it was a quote from Marcus Aurelius, just very simply put, you become like the things you give your attention to. And start paying attention. See that your ego isn't ramped up by watching lots of drama, watching reality TV, and identifying with or empathizing with the different characters that you'll find through different TV shows. I think reading affects us maybe even more dramatically in some ways. Maybe not with regard to our body language so much, but the kinds of words that we form within our inner monologue. I think part of the reason that I was feeling extra complainy the other day while we were walking up to Deception Pass is because one of the things I often do to regulate my inner monologue is I listen to Stoicism. It's one of the best tools for the job. It's just really good when it comes to being resilient and not letting the things which are outside of your control get you down. Keeping that in the front of your mind, you are looking out at the world through that lens. But of course, if you're spending more time socializing with other people that are enraptured by the thinking of the time, you're going to grow more like those people. And so Paige and I are constantly watching ourselves. I'm constantly watching myself in this regard. Just constantly kind of oscillating, being transmuted ever so slightly with each new interaction and each new bit of information that I consume, trying to shape a self that interfaces with the world in a more productive way than it ever has before. Ideally, eventually, the most optimally productive way possible, but also in such a way that I get as much out of it for myself. And I don't think that those two things are out of sync. I think that they go hand in hand. I think if the world needs anything, it's someone that is not run by their ego, but is simply a witness to their ego. And maybe it would be good to define ego for those of you that are unfamiliar with the nomenclature. Ego, as I'm referring to it, is pretty much all that you are. It's your opinions, your preferences, your memories, your aversions, even many of your perceptions, your impressions. That's ego. We identify with our ego. We consider that to be ourselves. But it's not truly, in that you can pull away from your ego and witness it for what it is. And then you can modify it and regulate it and turn it into something entirely different. Most of us really struggle to take on that reality. And we struggle to take it on because we live in a world that wants you to identify with stuff. If you're this kind of person, you'll vote this way. If you're this kind of person, you'll buy these things. If you're this kind of person, it's just this continuous story it's so hard to get away from it. Even all of our music, we're singing about these egoic things. Imagine a society that recognized that we're in a constant state of change. I think that people would have the opportunity to change more effectively. We would embrace that reality rather than pretend that it doesn't exist. The reason that this is especially important when it comes to the walk is in the highest states of meditation, we'll say states of altered consciousness, because it's not just meditation that will necessarily get you there. Other people have these experiences. You might experience something like ego dissolution. And when that you fades, when the self disappears, everything starts to look a little bit different. The interconnectedness of all things becomes much more apparent. The ways in which everything is affecting me and the ways in which I'm affecting everything around me. Everything that we think ripples outward into action, and everything that we do ripples outward into the rest of the world, into the thoughts that the world will think, and into the actions that the people of the world will act out. We're walking partly to raise awareness for this. We're walking also because in those states of ego dissolution, there seems to be a kind of moral imperative that might not be revealed to everybody else. But at least in our case, and in my case, there doesn't seem to be anything else that matters. I don't know what could matter other than making the world the best place that you possibly can with your little life. It's all there is to do. Chase after the money if you want to. Chase after the status if you want to. And see that it doesn't just lead you further into a pit of despair. Wealthy people can be happy, but it's not the wealth that brings them their happiness. It's nice to have money to play with, sure. The suffering that's created from worrying about money, of course, can detract from the experience that you have in your existence. But in the pursuit of the almighty dollar, you'll find nothing but disharmony with the rest of the world and frustration in your chase after it. It's far better to regulate your desire over the things that are outside of yourself and turn your desire in toward becoming the best version of yourself that you can and making the world the best place that you can. I sleep better at night now. I have better interactions with pretty much everybody. And it's just because I've decided I'm not going to buy into it anymore. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to make the world a worse place, even inadvertently, right? I'm not going to make the world a worse place by selling people things they don't need. I'm not going to make the world a worse place by abiding by certain bureaucratic ridiculousness that's just gumming up the works to having normal human interactions and trusting each other. Everybody has to sign a contract now, and they've got to be read a disclosure statement in order to to do. Like, none of us want this. You know that you don't want it. I don't want it. And we're all just living in this state of tension with it. We blame other people for these policies. We blame other people for the way that the world is working against itself. And then we just abide by it, and we're as much a part of it. I'm not doing it anymore. That's why I left corporate work 7 years ago, and I've never turned around since then. I don't care if I'm eating out of garbage cans and I am like preaching to people on the street that all they need to do is love each other. That's good enough for me. I'm incredibly thankful that the walk has had the success it has. And it's really nice to not like suffer through it in the way that we suffered through a lot of the beginning of it. But choosing this path toward the betterment of society, to just talk to people about the things that we think might help them live more contentedly, help get along with people that they don't necessarily empathize with, live more resiliently, not talk to themselves in such a terrible way. Nothing feels like that. It's fulfillment. I mean, like I've never experienced before. It's just fulfilling. You're just living every day. Like, you're kind of facing death all the time, and you're in pain all day long, and it's such a struggle, and it's so worth it because of the fulfillment that you get from it, to know that you're making the world a better place. I kind of veered off away from it. Here's what I'll say. I think this is probably the thing to close the video on, because we're just getting deeper and deeper into the why. When you look at the greatest Enlightenment figures, I mean, I wrote a whole series about this, but I'm just going to do it informally here. When you look at the greatest Enlightenment figures throughout history, Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, a lot of different mystics, a lot of like maybe tribal ascetic practitioners, sage-like people, guru-like people. There's a common theme among them. They do things which result in the dissolution of their ego and which reveal their sense of self to be of their own contrivance, of their own fabrication. They go out into the woods and they spend a lot of time in social isolation. They might fast, they might meditate, but it allows them to decondition from the environment that's around them, to stop telling themselves the same stories that they've been telling themselves for so long. And then they come back and they start talking about it. They start talking about God. They start talking about how the pursuit of materialism is the wrong way to spend our time. And I genuinely believe it's because what they've experienced is it's a dissolution of ego. All of those things, fasting, meditation, social isolation, they result in a dampening of the default mode network of the brain, which is several brain regions in communication with one another that literally form our sense of self. And through MRI scans, we can show that certain drugs turn off these regions of the brain, and that meditation does the same thing. And when we get away from our ego, when we are able to finally see it for what it is, love seems to be our moral imperative. It seems that all that we're supposed to do is bring people together. Stop dividing the world into these ridiculous, arbitrary categories, because it's all connected. We're all connected to one another in some way, shape, or form. The person who I've gotten my food from at the store, out of all the hands it's went through to finally reach my plate, I'm connected to that person in some way. I'm connected to the ground that the food came from in some way. And everything that we do, being that we are connected all together, in the end, we need to make sure that our impact on the world is the best that it can be. And it feels like that's a higher calling. And it's almost irrevocably simple. It's just stop judging everybody. Figure out how to open up your heart. Figure out how to open up your mind. And accept that because you're this little self that's made up of only the information that you've consumed, and you've had no way of, knowing what it was like to consume the information that they consumed as it was filtered through their brain, which was created out of their particular genetic predispositions. We don't know what it's like to experience another person's experience, so all we can do is accept them. I mean, if you think that something is morally better than what this other person is doing, it's fine to have a conversation about it, but don't demonize them for it. They're still probably doing their best to be a good person. Even if they're clearly struggling at times to be a good person or doing not so great things, they might be self-aware enough to know they're not great things. And aren't we all? I mean, the food that I eat isn't the best food that I could eat. It's not the most ethical food that I could eat. I have no leg to stand on when it comes to somebody else's, what it is that they're doing. Some person out there is littering. I never litter. And I ideally would not want them to litter. But it's also possible that they eat far fewer calories than me, and that their existence is still resulting in fewer lives lost than my existence. So who am I to judge them? I feel like our conversation has been a little bit chaotic and has been all over the place in it, but I might share this. Love resonates with everybody because of something deeper within each of us. Can I prove it rationally? Nope. Can I prove it logically? Nope. Experientially, though, this seems to be the case. My anecdote from me to you, out of the thousands of people that we've met, is that people are brought together under the banner of love and a lack of judgment and open-mindedness. We can come together if we can stop saying to ourselves, yeah, I do love everyone, but I hate that they're doing these things. I love you, but I can't have you doing this thing right here, so I'm gonna tell you why you're wrong for doing that stuff. We can talk to people about these things, of course, but it's not the way to get to know someone. We can't lead in conversation that way, and sometimes we have to accept that we're just going to have that difference of opinion, and that we each need to live our own lives in the way that we see fit, and we can still find love for people that are living their lives in a different way than we would want them to. Nothing could be more important in society right now. Nothing could be more important in society ever, really. And that's what the walk is about. Our minds are plastic. They're malleable. We can shape them. We can shape them into becoming the kind of person that's resilient enough to walk across the country. We can shape them into becoming the kind of person that's open-minded enough and loving enough to accept nearly any kind of person. Ran out of storage. Never buy a phone with only 64 gigabytes. 50 of the gigabytes are going to be taken up by stuff that's already installed on the phone. But that pretty much concludes what I was talking about. Love's more important than anything else. We know this when we can step outside of ourself and realize that our self is the source of so much of the division, and that it doesn't have to be, that we can turn it into something else and transform it into something that leads with love, is non-judgmental, is more open-minded, and more resilient. and capable of finding contentment under nearly any circumstance. That's the point of the walk. Look, we can change. Look, we can change for the better. Look, you don't have to be a part of the problem. You don't have to do the things that you think are making the world a worse place. Abandon it all if you need to. Live in harmony with what you see as the highest virtue. Go for it. There's nothing more worth it. We get this one life. We get this one opportunity to experience. Maybe there are more opportunities. Maybe we'll get reincarnated. Maybe there's a heaven. Maybe all that's true. We don't know. As much as you think that you know, you don't really know. So whatever you do it intentionally. Do it all the way. Don't do something that you think you need to do because you have to do it because that's what society has told you. Don't. It'll be okay. Because you can change. We can all change. And we can all change together. This content is made possible by the better nature of appreciative individuals. If you want to support our work, you can donate at walkingamericacouple.com and help us change the outside by changing the inside.